In this video, I am going to teach you how to paint this poppy step by step with acrylic paints. First, you need to download a copy of the PDF file of the photo I took for reference. And for my paint choices, I use the color theory to help make my decisions. And if you're new to painting, you should invest in a color wheel tool because this is just invaluable to create beautiful art. You can see here that I chose to use red and green, the complements off of the color wheel, and I also use the analogous colors, which are the colors that are next to the red and the green, and it worked really well with the composition of this flower. You'll need to have some gesso on hand for preparing the paper to accept the acrylics. And the brushes I used are the Royal & Langnickel Gold Talcum brushes. These are pretty inexpensive, about $11 on Amazon, but they were just the right sizes to do the shading and the washes and some of the detail. I did have to have a thin number 2 round when it came to doing the detail. I used the Canson Mixed Media. I like the Canson Mixed Media sketchbook with the 138-pound paper. I use the hardback. I like the hardback better than the softback. I'm also now what I'm doing is prepping the paper by mixing gesso with the Grumbacher Academy turquoise green color. So I'm taking a little bit of water because the gesso's a little thick and mixing that with the turquoise to apply to the back of the canvas. And of course by canvas, what I meant to say was paper. I normally paint on canvas, but for these YouTube videos, I decided I would use sketchbook and do sketchbook paintings. I usually use student grade for sketchbook paintings. I do have professional grade acrylic paints as well, but these are just fine for sketchbook paintings. You'll notice I'm using a large piece of scratch paper behind the sketchbook paper as I'm painting to protect the rest of the sketchbook because the paint will bleed onto the other pages. Originally, I thought I was going to go with just a straight turquoise green background, but as I looked at the photo and I thought about the color wheel, I decided that I would use some red violet or the Thio violet in the background to complement the yellow-green leaves that were going to be in there, and you know, it worked out really well. Now when I'm painting this background, I'm not overly concerned with just how perfect the edges are or the values. I'm just putting it on there and knowing that it's going to be a backdrop to the poppy, and not too worried about the shape of it or what it's going to look like on its own. Now that we're finished with step one, which is prepping the sketchbook paper, and it's good and dry, I like to use a blow dryer to facilitate that. Then you're going to sketch the poppy. Now I use the Woody 3-in-1 Stabilo pencils. I love those. Those are just like little watercolor pencils. You can use a regular pencil. If you are not comfortable with drawing, you can get some graphite transfer paper. I have a link in the description box. You can just place that right underneath the reference photo and trace the reference photo right onto the sketchbook, and you'll be ready to go on to step number 3. Just a little note about composition. Whenever I'm working from a reference photo, I always will make little tweaks to it to make the composition a little better if I think it needs it. You want the viewer, when they look at the painting, to stay in like a circle when they look in the painting. You don't want anything to point off of the page or off of the canvas that leads their eye away from what you want them to see. In this case, I want them to be looking at the center of the bloom, to look at the flower itself. So I'm going to draw those, the bud and the leaf. I'm tweaking them a little bit just so that the viewer will stay engaged in the painting and where I want them to look. So you have that right as an artist to look at that composition and tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit more pleasing for the viewer. For this next few sections, you're going to see me using Prism Violet a lot. You do not need to purchase Prism Violet. You can easily get Prism Violet just by mixing the Thio Violet, the Grumbacher Thio Violet, with Dioxazine Purple. For step 3, we're going to start blocking in the darker values in the flower using a medium brush and that Prism Violet. Notice I'm just studying the reference photo and copying all of the shadow spaces and just blocking that in with the Prism Violet. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Now usually for step 3 in the process, that Naphthol Crimson is probably a little too bright or brighter than what I would use. But because the background is this turquoise green and the student grade paints are translucent, it's okay to go ahead and use this bright shade of red because it will dry darker. So during this step, you're just going to keep looking at the shapes, keep looking at each of the petals individually, and see if you can copy the shapes, because if you keep doing that, that is going to really make the flower look realistic the more you copy those shapes. What I love about these flat brushes too is that you can turn them on their side and they'll make a nice thin line for you when you're wanting to put in sharp darks in there, like to show the curvature of that bottom petal there. The Art Smith brand Hooker's Green and Magenta that I'm using in this video are just inexpensive Joann acrylic brand paints, and since Joann's is out of business, you cannot get those anymore, but I wouldn't recommend them anyway. I would definitely stay with the Liquitex Basics. Now you'll see here that I take a lot of artistic license when it comes to leaves. I know I said to copy the petals as close as you can when you do the flower, but I like to make my leaves a little flowy, and you know, I like the look of them to be a little more impressionistic, I guess that's the word. Now, although I use white a lot to make colors lighter, I rarely use black to make any colors darker. I always go with the opposite color on the color wheel to make a color darker or to tone it down. But usually when it comes to shading in a painting like this, I will just go for like a dark purple or a dark blue to do the shading, and I just love the look of that. So if you're familiar with the value scale, you'll know that 0 is white and 10 is black with shades of gray in between. So what I'm looking at with step 3 is blocking in the dark values. So those are the values that are closer to black. So they're on that value scale. They're the darker colors. The next step we'll go into is step 4, which is painting the midtones, which would be in the middle part of that grayscale. So you have to look at your colors in terms of values. If you can try to see that how dark a color needs to be and how light a color needs to be to really make things look three-dimensional. I will say that I often will exaggerate how dark the darks are and how light the lights are to make a more of a contrast and a more dramatic painting at the end. And that's just what I prefer rather than realistic. You can see when I took the photograph of this poppy, this is just a silk poppy that I had, I set up a light in my studio here and to cast that shadow. So whenever you're making your own reference photos, get a lamp and put it next to it so that you can get shadow and have that contrast there. That will help your paintings a lot. I'm setting up my palette right now with lighter colors to move on to step 4, which is putting in the midtones. You'll see me many times go back and add darks, even in the mid-tones part 4 or step 4 of this process, because as soon as I paint something and I see, oh, I want more shadow or more dark there, it's okay. There's no hard fast rule. You can go back and add more shadows there. Now I am definitely painting slower than what these time-lapse videos show, but what is nice about acrylic paints is that they do dry quickly so that you can layer over the top of them. But if you want to work wet on wet, you can. You just have to work a little bit more quickly. But it is nice that you can layer on top of them as well. Very different than oil painting. Now, if the pages or the corners of your sketchbook start to curl up from being wet, it's okay. Just use a binder clip to hold down the corner of the page, and then as it dries, it'll flatten out a lot. Now you'll notice when I'm painting this that I use a couple of different lighter greens. I'm using this phthalo yellow green, Grumbacher Academy color that I really like, and then I will mix a lemon yellow with that hooker's green to make a more lime color green. I think the more different, I guess, hues that you use within the same color, it just really gives variety, different nuances to the painting, and makes it a lot more interesting. You can see here that I'm going back in with the Prism Violet to put more darks in. I covered up a lot of the darks when I put in that mid-tone green. There was still some showing through, but I decided that I wanted to have more shadows put back in, and it kind of blends with the green too, so it works. So now you see I'm making the lime green I talked about earlier by using lemon yellow and the hooker's green. You can see that I just keep layering color on top of color on top of color to get the feel of the painting and to give depth to the flower and the leaves. I can't stress enough that most of the time that I spend painting is just looking back and forth at the shapes to just see if I can get the shapes of the petals right. And then looking at the shadows and the colors within the shapes of each petal to see if I have those shapes right. So just keep working on that, and next thing you know, the flower bloom is going to look like that photograph. So what you can see I'm doing here is I'm using a smaller brush and I'm going around the edges of the petals, and I'm looking at, I guess, the bumpiness, that texture around the edges of the petals really adds a lot when you include that in on your painting. You'll also notice that as I paint and work on the inside of these petals, I am using brush strokes that go along that concave surface there to give the feel that those petals are curved. So on the outside I'll do brush strokes that come up, and then I'll have ones that come down inside the bloom. Now I'm about to add what I call a pizzazz color to the leaves in this painting, and so I am checking the color wheel to make sure that that fits in with what I'm trying to do here. Use your color wheel as a reference when you're wanting to add these pizzazz colors to your pieces. I'm not going crazy with this bright aqua green. I'm just doing little touches in there because too much of it would just not be good for this painting, but just a little bit here and there, and it really adds something special. Honestly, this is my favorite part of painting, is when I get to the end and I get to, be a little creative with adding these colors that are obviously not in the reference photo and not in real life, but just something that I feel that brings this poppy to life in an artistic way. So you can see here, just as I did with the bright aqua green, I'm going to use a magenta and add touches to the poppy in magenta. Even though that poppy is definitely an orange red, I'm going to use a little pink in there as a pizzazz color. I feel like I may look a little fussy about painting the petals on this flower, but there really is intention as I look at it and as I study the photograph. I am looking for every little minute detail of the shadows and the placement of the different values and the shapes of those petals to get that flower to look exactly the way I want it to. Now we're moving on to step 5, which is adding highlights to your painting. You can see here I'm using cadmium yellow deep. It's going to blend with those oranges that are on the flower, and it will add a nice highlight. Now I saved this yellow for the end. You always want to save your pretty brightest, lightest colors for the end of your pieces. So I could see that I needed some darker darks than what is in the piece to make it more dramatic. And at first I thought to grab the ivory black, but as you can see, I changed my mind and went to dioxazine purple, which is darker than the prism violet. I'm looking at that bottom petal that is curved up, and I can see that I want that curve to be very clean and have a sharp edge on it there. So what I do is I take the brush and I turn it to its side. That's what's nice about those flat brushes, and you can get a nice clean round edge there. This is my first YouTube step-by-step tutorial, and I was thinking about doing maybe a series of flowers like this, maybe single flowers, and teaching a step-by-step of how I do mine. If you are interested in that, please leave a comment below this video and let me know. As you can see, we're almost finished with the poppy. Step 6 is just to add some finishing touches. So I'm going to study it, look at some places that really need just that final touch, maybe a lighter highlight. Now, I'm not concerned with the exact number of stamens in the center of that flower, or trying to make them look exactly like the reference photo. I am just merely suggesting that they're there, and the viewer knows what they are. Throughout the painting, I've layered different colors in there. I've done purple, I've done the bright aqua green, I've done green. And now I'm even going to use a little gold that I've mixed up from the cadmium orange with white, and I believe there was some cadmium yellow deep in there as well. So I'm going to add some finishing touches with that gold color. You can see here that I've even decided to add yet another color, which is dioxazine purple mixed with white, as one of the highlight colors. That is the focal point of my painting, so I want to make sure that the viewer's eye is drawn to the center of that flower. As a matter of fact, the viewer's eye is going to be drawn to the contrast in those upper petals there, where there's such a contrast between dark and light. It kind of comes down into the, well, actually it does. It comes down into the center of that flower. So the viewer's eye is definitely going to be drawn right there, wherever there's such a sharp contrast between light and dark. Please share your painting after you've finished it. I have a Facebook page, K Green Art Studio, and I would love to see how your painting turned out. So please check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more paintings.